This Sunday at Mike's. Yet another episode we're doing here tonight. Glad to have everybody here. As I always do when I start out these live streams, I mention the fact that I appreciate you spending your valuable time with me. And as always, greatly appreciated. And I want to let you know that I try not to disappoint. So if you tune in tonight, guaranteed, I've got something to say that you might want to hear. Scott, how you doing, sir? How's my volume? Everything okay today? I gave up on the other mic. Let's see if this one is working. So far, it looks like it's okay. Let me see if I can hear myself. Well, I'm still on commercial over here, so I can't check yet. But while we're waiting to check, make sure sound is okay, which it looks like it is. Sounds like it is. But while we're waiting. Yeah, absolutely. All right. What's going on here at Upstairs to the Right Studio? Well, I'm still waiting for Fern to finish up with my partner Strat, HH Strat. Haven't heard from him yet. Ben, how you doing, sir? Welcome. But that's okay. I want him to take his time because when he takes his time, it just comes out really lovely. And so I'll keep you posted on that so that we can post part two of me putting that together. I have part one up on my regular content. If you haven't seen it, take a look. Yeah. What else has been going on here? Mr. Watson in the house. How you doing? Good to see you. Basically, everything has been okay here. Quiet. I was able to secure a pretty nice Greco. I mentioned to you guys before. I did get it. It's on its way eventually. Probably another week or so. Greco RG 750. It's actually a full-scale copy of John Lennon's three pickup Rickenbacker. And I've never had a guitar like that before. This one, the guy that I got it from has a shop. And not only did he replace, it's not 100%, it's 82. So, that's okay. But it's not 100%. He did have to replace some parts, but he did them at the shop. He did it himself, as well as rewired the pots and the caps, everything else original. So it's going to be good out the box. So as good of an example of that guitar as you're going to get. Don't know how running a Rickenbacker through that Laney will sound. But we'll give it a shot and see how it turns out. So I am excited about that. So that's a good one. Yeah, beauty. It's a real beauty. Three pickups, just a beauty. So that I look forward to. And another Greco Strat, 600 this time from 1979, I'm going to say, 78, 79. It's got to be because that model didn't come out until 78. So 78, 79. Should be interesting. Mr. Larson in the house, how you doing? So that's what's coming up with those. So I'm looking forward to that. Possibly Greco. I'm going to sneeze, guys. I'm trying not to sneeze because when I sneeze, it's super loud. Don't want to do that. Did I find it? I think I did. A Greco SG also possibly coming up here. I've had one before, but this one, it's a possibility. So we'll see. Yeah, I fought that sneeze. It's a miracle. So there is that. Well, guys, I think everybody's here that's going to be here, so we'll get started. Now, I had alluded to this in the last live stream. So if you haven't caught that, you can go back and rewind on that. Hit rewind and take a listen. But I had talked about the impact of tariffs that are looming in the horizon here and what effect that would have on the guitar market. Because as I've said, inflation is one thing, tariffs are a whole other thing altogether. Interestingly enough, to lead this story off, this topic off, recently Colombia didn't want to get with the program. So the current administration said we're going to levy a 25% tariff on all your imports. By the end of a week, if you haven't got with the program, we're going to make that 50%. And then we're also going to restrict any kind of air travel between your country and ours as well. And within a short amount of time, they got with the program. So I mentioned that story. That all happened today, or just, yeah, within the last 4 hours. So when I talk about these tariffs, if you think it's a 50-50 chance, you're wrong. They're serious about this. And since it's a serious subject, I decided to do a little bit of serious research into it and to see what the outcomes of something like that in the guitar market would be, a 10% tariff. Of course, we're talking about China, and because, and I'll mention it later on, there are other countries that are not falling under that tariff, interestingly enough. Again, it's called getting with the program or not. And honestly speaking, there are some alternatives here that guitar companies that are dealing in China, in this case tonight we're going to talk about Epiphone, can do in order to not only lower their prices, but also get over the specter of something like that having an effect on their bottom line. So we're delving into a hot topic, could reshape the guitar industry as we know it. The recent discussions around a possible 10% tariff on all Chinese imports and how it might impact Epiphone. Now, for those who might be new here tonight to us, I'm Mike McWilliams, and this channel really is about music gear, guitars, talking about topics that affect those two things. And I do appreciate you taking to join in. And my regular guys, I always thank you at the end today. I wanted to make a note here to thank you here up front for always supporting this channel. All of you guys, you know, just always here for me, and I appreciate it. So let's get started. So those 10% tariff on Chinese imports, when passed, I didn't write if, I wrote when passed, could mean that any goods made in China, including guitars, would have an additional 10% cost for importers. So I looked at Epiphone, of course, because they are produced in Guangdong, and that's a hard one to pronounce, in China. And it is, without a fact, something that could affect their bottom line. And of course, that will eventually lead to price increases with us consumers. Now, I am a supporter of Epiphone, as you guys know, to a certain extent. I think that the Japanese Epiphones, again, if you can get your hands on one, and they are getting really hard to find, and that's one of the things that I do is looking around for things. I don't see a lot of them. Are some excellent instruments on all levels, regardless of whether you get the tip-top ones, the really nice ones, or the Go Sen Yen models, either or Go Ma Yen model. Either way, you're doing good with those. So China eventually got themselves to the point where they were doing just as good, especially with their new Inspired by Gibson line, as some of those, not all of those, not the tip-top ones, but some of the really nice Epiphones that were being produced in Japan. And it's a shame because they have set up a factory there, they have trained people, and, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. But look at the Epiphone Les Paul Standard, for example. I looked that up. What is it going for? Basically, I do euros and dollars. We're going to say $5.99. So a 10% tariff would add an additional $60 per guitar. So you're basically going to add $5.60 on that. And let us not forget that you have to add the dealer markups, the shipping, and suddenly that guitar probably is going to come at more than $700. Now, again, like I said, it's $599. And if these tariffs take effect, they will immediately, overnight, in some countries, particularly the United States, increase in value. And so I'll start off by saying, if you're thinking about buying an Epiphone, this reason alone is reason enough for you to go ahead and do it. Because quite frankly speaking, that is a seriously real possibility. As a matter of fact, a better in my mental calculations, 90% chance of happening. So just to give you that, it could be $700 or more on the Epiphone Standard 50, which I think is a fantastic guitar. Is it $700 fantastic? Well, I don't know. Or more, actually. So the consumer, at the end of the day, will end up paying for it. And that's just the end of it. And I don't know if that additional 10% tariff, which let's just round it up and say could actually equate to $100 per guitar additional cost as far as Epiphones, again at 10% on the $599 is going to be a big difference in the 10% on the $1399 of some of their top models, and then you start adding theoretically an additional 150 to that 150. So it's starting to creep up there. Now, Epiphone isn't alone in this. Other companies like Squire, Ibanez, and even boutique brands are outsourcing to Chinese factories, and they could face similar challenges. And while we're talking about Chinese factories, Behringer is a Chinese company. And so there's going to be a 10% increase on their pedals, like that Vibe 69 that I decided against. I just got to the point in my life where with the cheap pedals, like I said, I'll roll the dice on them if I hear a good demo on YouTube. I haven't heard a good demo on that, so yeah. But I digress. And cases, stands, cables, amp parts, many of which are made in China, could get pricier real quick. So I used Epiphone kind of as a hook to bring people into watching this live stream and getting into this discussion. And I'd like to hear from you guys out there what you think as we go along, so don't forget to chime in if you can. If you're driving, please keep both hands on the steering wheel. But thanks for tuning in anyway. Think of the implications of that. This, my little screw you portable amp, my vacation amp. Stick this in a backpack and take a guitar with you, and you're good to go. A little dusty here. This thing, would go up 10%. It would no longer be attractive. I can't remember what I paid for this, but it's just something as insignificant as that could get a lot more cost there. Ibanez has factories in multiple countries, including Indonesia. And I think that they kind of, gave themselves a little bit of a cushion there if something happened to their Chinese production. They can shift easily all their production over to Indonesia, and that would be the end of that. And as I've talked about before, I've said that I could see Epiphone. I've been harping on this for years now, actually, that I foresaw Epiphone in moving to India. And this is one of the reasons why, one of the main reasons why. Because the tariffs or any kind of sanctions that are imposed on China could get pricey for Epiphone. And of course, at the end of the day, that gets pricier for consumers. And let's be honest, they're selling well. As I showed you in previous discussions, that the budget guitars are flying off the shelves, the premium brands and the boutique brands are not. And of course, this will have an impact on the bottom line of those who don't have the cushion that Ibanez has. They can, again, like I said, say, okay, that's it, closing up shop in China. Let's shift all this the excess production over to Indonesia, which can, as I told you before, have 4 tractor trailers of wood per shift per day, and there's 3 shifts. So they you can say that the Indonesians definitely got wood. Fender has already moved some Squire models to Indonesia. They've moved some Fender models to Indonesia. You guys check out now that you can get a Fender branded Indonesian made Strat. Dig that. It's made in Indonesia, just like their Squire. So it begs the question, what would be the difference between, because is it like that Go Mayan, Nana Mayan, Ju Mayan price range difference that we saw with Japanese Grecos and things of that nature, where the Squire would be the Go Mayan and the Fender from the same factory would be the Nana Mayan. It's looking that way. An interesting thing there. So their Classic Vibe series was originally made in China, but they have since transitioned over to Indonesia. And it is hilarious to read in some forums, some guys will say that the Chinese made ones are better than the Indonesian made ones, and vice versa. Hold on here. Michael Watson, they're about $100 more than Classic Vibe. Yeah. So thank you, Michael. So there you have that tier system. Again, like as I suspected. So that's interesting. So for $100 more than Classic Vibe, you can get a Fender branded Strat. That we know from the quality of the Classic Vibe. I've got one sitting on the floor here behind me. I need to take that out. Haven't had it out in a minute. And Telecaster. And the quality of them are fantastic. Absolutely fantastic, without question. Are there Fender Indonesian-made Strats going to be $100 nicer? Maybe, possibly. Something there. Maybe the pickups. Maybe they bring the pickups from Mexico or the States or something like that. It's a possibility. Thank you, Michael, for that. That's interesting. So, one potential move for companies like Epiphone relocating their production to India. Why have I been talking about India for a while now? India is already emerging as a manufacturing hub. Fender, for instance, produces some acoustic guitar models in India. One of the big problems that happened when Gibson moved their factories in the 70s is that when they moved to their new location, the workers there, particularly in the acoustic guitar part of the manufacturing wing there, in the early days of that new factory, were terrible. That's what the acoustic guitars, the Gibson acoustics, are the ones from the 70s that you should by all means avoid. Don't ever buy a 70s. I mean, unless you can get it for a screen, but don't let anybody try to sell it to you at a premium at all. Those are complete dogs. They got better at it, and as a result, their solid body guitar got better as well. And the fact that India has a head start on the production of acoustic guitars and that under their belt, I think that it won't take long for them to ramp into producing solid bodies as well, which I'm sure they do. Again, the reason why things move from Japan to Korea to China and a possible future now, certainly in Indonesia or India, is because of cost. The lower labor costs in India are another reason why that makes sense. A growing skilled workforce for instrument making, as I mentioned, is another reason. Fewer geopolitical tensions, which could mean a longer term stability for the company. It takes a lot of money to turn off the lights at a factory. And then on that machinery, what happens to it? And will the government, and in some cases, in some reports that I'm reading, the Chinese government is not letting Foxconn of its equipment. Would they do the same thing with Epiphone? Say, hey, you guys, bye, but by the way, you're leaving all your, your CNC. We're going to be really pumping out the chipsons now. Boy, if you thought we're going to flood eBay with them, but that could happen. Infrastructure isn't as developed in China. The power grid goes out quite. If you've spent time in India, if you've been there to any of the major cities, power is an issue, and you got to have a steady kind of source of electricity if you want to keep those machines running the way that they should be. So that's a challenge. Now, it takes time to train a workforce and set up quality control, as I mentioned, and there's always going to be an adjustment period initially. However, again, like I said, they do have a little bit of a jump start. They are producing acoustic guitars, which is tough. You know, and if they've got that down, then they can move on. Now, imagine an Epiphone inspired by Gibson Les Paul for $13.99. I think that's kind of what they're going for. More if the tariff kicks in. But let's say that that they've moved over to India. Instead of made in China on the back, it says made in India. Would that change the way that you feel about them? Much like okay, we'll I don't care about what it says on the headstock. I've moved beyond that. I'm into a whole different terrible place that you will be, or you may be there yourself. But where it's made, does that make a difference? I have a preference. I think is quite obvious for Japanese-made guitars, particularly ones made in the 1970s. It's kind of my bread and butter. But honestly, if somebody gave me an Indian-made Epiphone, would I turn my nose up to it? Probably no. I'd be very curious to see what kind of workmanship and certainly what kind of wires. That's always a dead giveaway. The quality of the pots, the caps, things like that. So it would be a curiosity for me, but I don't know how you guys feel about that. How would you take it if you found yourself with a mated, Epiphone, especially paying that kind of money? Would you do it? Would it change your mind about it? Now, the tariff issue isn't just about Epiphone. It's about the entire guitar industry adjusting to new realities. Like I said before, it affects everything. My tool, these tools are Chinese-made tools that I use. I've been stocking up on them now, and I will accelerate my stocking up on them. There's no tariffs here on products from China and Europe yet, but it is something that I could see these guys following along with if it does happen. So that could easily happen to me as well. And the results of that are not great. Trade wars tend to lead to hot wars, but we'll leave that for another time, for another discussion, another rabbit hole. But these are strong, real possibilities. And they affect a lot of stuff. The difference between classic vibe and the new Fenders would be interesting. Yeah, I really, I'm sure I'll have an opportunity in one of these music stores to run into it. Some of my clients are Fender dealers, so I'll get a chance to handle one. I'm curious myself. I'm curious. I am. So we shall see. If I do get my hands on one, I'll tell you what I thought. we've seen this before. Like I said, Japanese guitars dominated in the 70s, 80s because they offered a great quality at lower prices. And then the production moved to Korea, then to China, and now Indonesia. And India will be next on that list. It's not just about tariff. Sustainability, labor laws, and consumer expectations also play a role. You know, the sustainability issue is there. Certainly, I talk about that a bit, quite a bit. But it affects a lot of things. You know, I'm looking around. I got a lot of, made Chinese made tools here and certain things. None of my pedals are Chinese made. Although the Mooer, okay, the Mooer is. But it affects these things where the price of them could increase here certainly in the future. And for example, many players are now willing to pay more for guitars made under fair labor practices or using sustainable materials. Not my generation, we could give two Fs. I talk about it, I just hate the overproduction of guitars. However, the younger generations do factor these things in. It is important to them. And the shift in consumer values could, I hope, push manufacturers to change their strategies. But, it's hard. And Letty says, I'm about a bus player. I'm about a bus player. Well, you ain't that in another direction, player. Ain't nobody busting nothing in this direction. So, Epiphone has brought back some of their production back to the United States, but not to the level that, it would make sense to close down shop and move everything back to the States. If it's just the price of Epiphones, you might as well buy a Gibson. Really add what it would in order to produce those in the States. Unless, along with those tariffs, there are incentives to manufacturers in the States to bring a lot of that stuff back in. Governments can certainly do things that would legislate things that would make it advantageous to do that. So I give that a less than a 10% chance. No, that's not fair. A 20% chance of happening. However, you could see the return of all Epiphones being produced in the United States for reasons, as I mentioned, making it attractive legislation for them to do so. It's a possibility. And, I alluded to it, and I talked about boutique builders. A lot of boutique builders and guitar builders, they source their parts, a lot of stuff from China. I know my luthier in Singapore, he was sourcing a lot of his stuff from China. He had a guy in China that he trusted. He was a Chinese Singaporean, so there's no language barrier there. And he ordered stuff from this guy. And certainly that is something that was advantageous to him. However, that's good for him being in Singapore, doesn't have to worry about the tariff, but if you got his equivalent in the United States or possibly Europe, then that's going to cause a problem too when the margins on these things are already wafer thin. So it is a tenuous position to be in if you're a small builder and these tariffs are looming. Again, like I said, and even in order to move production back to the States, you would have to open up shops that would start producing parts like bridges on a whole scale. This one is made in Japan, so this is a Japanese-made bridge from a Greco 450 that I kept. because it's lightweight. I like all my light bridges I keep. But you have to ramp up production somewhere on this, and in order to meet the demand of of this no longer being available. For example, its Chinese equivalent, which is on most Epiphone parts. And who could take that over? Well, in Indonesia, they are producing certainly parts. But again, like I said, it gets complicated, guys. It's a kind of a thought game that I play with myself. Well, if this, then what? You go down that rabbit hole, and it starts to get convoluted. Especially if that 20% chance of production being moved back to the States occurs, would they even be able to handle production? I guess is another way of saying that. Could they start pumping out, the amount of bridges and tuners and this, that, and the other that you would need in order to complete that project? And and where would they source that? Hell, well, a lot of these parts places are, at the end of the day, they're sourcing their parts from China. Very few of it is made in Germany, like some good bridges are, or the States. So it could have implications. It's a big deal, but it's also part of this larger shift that we're seeing in the guitar industry. And companies like Epiphone will have to make tough decisions. At the end of the day, however, it is quite clear that we as players are going to be the ones that are going to feel that impact. It's going to have implications for us. Not good ones. Cables, pedals, you name it. Little knickknacks, oddities, things like that. The cost of them are going to go up. And Alibaba and Temu and all those things could really see a significant hit. Not could be, I think that's one of the reasons behind this. They will see a significant hit. So there is that. And of course, eBay, but a lot of that stuff comes from China. So those sellers on eBay will have to increase their prices. See, as you go down that rabbit hole and see the implications that you see, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to me because we've gotten to the point where we've gotten too far dependent upon China produce. I was good. I actually cleaned up and put everything away. I don't have my parts stuff. Here's one actually that like this. Stuff like this. This is made in China. They didn't even have the decency to stamp it made in China. But stuff like this, is going to increase in value. In price. Not in value. And quality is going to remain the same or even possibly diminish, go down as a result of what those tariffs would do on the Chinese side to producing this. So, it's significant in the end. It's a big deal. And I bring this as a public service announcement tonight, this subject, in order to put it into your mind that this is a real possibility. It's not something that you can sleep on. It's something that you need to plan on, think about. Maybe you want to spend your money, wisely now on obtaining some things that may be more expensive down the line, whether it be a whole guitar or parts or tools or something like that. Hit up Temu. I don't judge before it gets to be too late for that avenue for tools. Temu is good for most of the tools on Temu. If you look between eBay, Temu, and Alibaba, they're all the same. They're the same tools. So either one of those, I could say it's pretty much six. Where they used to say six or half a dozen or of the other. it's the same thing. So, but either way, that's might be a move that you might want to make. I had no plans on buying any modern Epiphones. I'm always on the lookout for the right priced, Japanese one. But certainly, if I was, I'd be looking at buying one. If I was thinking about buying it, as I said, even with some of the Behringer things, that drum machine I was thinking about, and the Vibe 69 pedal, you know, those would go up. If I had continued my thoughts on buying those, then certainly that would be a move that I want to make now. Because the possibility of the window is closing that tariff. It could happen any day. You'll wake up and that tariff will be in place. And depending upon where you are in the world, that could affect you. So again, kind of a PSA here tonight, guys. Epiphone is going to have to make some tough decisions. Really, seriously. They're going to have to make some real hard decisions about what they're going to do here. Because, again, at the end of the day, this is going to affect their bottom line. It's going to make things extremely hard to keep any kind of stability in their supply chain with these geopolitical uncertainties floating around their business. So, but it's not just them. Other companies have some decisions to make too. Some companies, as I pointed out, have given themselves a little bit of padding in order to make sure that they can quickly shift production that's lost in one arena to another. That's smart thinking on the part of Ibanez, by the way. But we have not seen that with Epiphone. So, maybe they should have made this move a long time ago. Listen, I've heard the tariff on Mexico could be 25%. Fender Player Series could go up. Yeah, I think that is one of the reasons, again, why you saw them shift production of a Fender Player over to Indonesia. See, again, they gave themselves a buffer. It was a smart move that you're just not seeing with Epiphone. If a 25% tariff goes on Mexican-made guitars, you can say, okay, we'll just start pumping them out of Indonesia. So you see, again, when I talk about these shifts in the market, this is what I'm talking about. This is that kind of shift, and this is how it happens, And we are living through a period of that shift for the reasons that we've discussed tonight. And plan accordingly at the end of the day is what this message is, And again, understand what quality is. Always look for that price quality ratio. Time for the Puerto Rican Epiphone. Well, that's United States territory, and it's not going to be cheap. So yeah, we're not going to see. We'll see the Indian one before we saw the Puerto Rican one. And then you'd get, that wouldn't work. They need a place that they don't have the possibility of labor unions. And Puerto Rico ain't it. But certainly, these shifts that we're seeing occur, and the ways that they're occurring, and the speed at which they're occurring, by the way, it could be a completely different landscape by this time 2026 in the guitar market in that regard. And the mechanisms that some companies have taken in order to negate the negative tariff difficulties that could come across them in the future um, really, honestly, is a smart play. Those companies that have not, they're going to see some issues. They're going to see some issues there. And the Epiphone is certainly one of them. At a time that they're doing well sales wise. Not a good time. But, you know, I'm curious about these Indonesian made fenders. That's something. That's something. You know, somebody mentioned last week or the week before about there's YouTube guys out there who just, the new ones, the third wave that I call them guys, who like to just complain about things in order to make themselves look smart. I think that was Scott who said that. And that was a great observation. I thought about that because you see a lot of that. And there's this one guy, and his title of his, you know, the Fender must think we're idiots. And he's talking about that Indonesian made Fender Strat. He completely misses the point as to why that's occurring. And so, you know, dig a little deeper, think a little deeper, and you can see that there's a reason behind these shifts. And again, you know, I'm curious. I mean, the Epiphone is in a precarious position because there's nowhere they can, you know, they could contract out to Indonesia to immediately start going into production at that tariff hits, and they may ride that tariff out and say, hey, well, it won't last long, we'll ride it out, and we'll pass it on to the consumer, you know, but that's not a winning formula. It's not a winning formula. It's not one that is great. And the Chinese government on their end may say, well, we're not going to let you, you know, produce or send anything out. You get ugly. Trade wars are ugly. They get ugly. That's why I said they lead typically, historically, to shooting wars. That's just the reality of it. If you have any decent read of history. But a precarious position to be in for them. So, but a precarious position for us all. Again, like I said, I'm going to assess. I'll be honest with you, you know, things are tight right now. I don't have excess cash to spend on things, really. But I'm going to try to see where I can make one last push to buy some tools that I need in order to work on instruments. At the end of the day, it's a good investment because it saves me money. So that down the road, I don't have to pay anybody to do it. I can do it myself. And just be done with it. You know, because again, like I said, and tomorrow may be too late. That's the reality. That's how impending this is. And as you saw with the opening story of the Columbia, that's a declaration that can be made overnight. American administration says, from midnight tonight, you know, it's a whole different ball game. And you could wake up, sitting there eating your Wheaties, and realize that Epiphone you were going to get this Saturday just got 10%, or in this case, we've demonstrated, realistically $100 more. Just overnight. Just like that. And so, just not just that, but the pedal you were going to buy, the new cable that you were going to get, the new pedal board that you were thinking about getting to put some of the pedals that are going to also go up, increase in price. You know, my J card on this video was, you know, plus 10% on everything. And I meant that, you know, when I designed that, that was the point. It's going to be plus 10% on everything if you're, you know, and it's in front of a music store if you guys haven't looked at it, on everything. And again, PSA guys, public service announcement here tonight. very short one. Well, actually, not very short. I want my normal time. But just one to put it in your mind if you hadn't thought about it. Because it is a stone cold hard reality. I'm not the boy crying wolf. I'm not being overly, you know, excited about it. Is that the word I want to use? Anyway, you get my meaning. As we saw with what happened with some countries not getting with the program, how that program went into effect like that overnight. Do I think that China is going to get with the program? Hell no. No, no. They're in a precarious economic position in China right now. Their GDP numbers is a complete falsehood because their production numbers and the number of businesses that are going out that are barely hanging on only represents 30% of their total. The other 70% are failing or failed. So you can't have a 5.2% GDP growth under that situation. It's nonsense. The 10% tariff would just be the icing on the cake for them economically. You could push them in two directions, or to get with the program, come to the table, so to speak, or worse things. So that is the reality of it. Now, if it gets to be the worst thing, how much the cost of that pedal board costs really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Other concerns are going to matter a lot more. But let's hope that sanity prevails and that they do go to the table. But either way, it will happen. And the outcome of it will be interesting too. Well, I won't say it will. It has a strong possibility. I'll hedge myself by saying it has a strong possibility of happening. Almost to the point of saying it will. Wink, wink. So there's that. Something to chew on, guys. If there's, think about it. Like I said, right now, January, February is always tight for me. So it's a bad time for this to go on. But if that was it, then okay, then I would have to bite the bullet and see what I can scrounge around and get in Japan. I have other options, so it's not something I absolutely have to do. I can turn to Japan for certain luthier tools. I have that option. I got people flying back and forth from Japan all the time. So there is that for me, but maybe you don't have that option. So something to think about, something to consider. Well, I don't know how well we did tonight. I have 8 people watching and 6 thumbs up, so that's great. My last live stream that I did on Wednesday I have over 500 views, I believe, on one. So it is amazing to me. It is amazing to me. Some topics that do well and others that don't. Maybe this will pick up, we'll see. But I want to thank Scott, Michael, Benny, Letty for your busting. Ben, I want to thank you guys for showing up tonight, at least hanging there with me. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys got something out of this tonight. Again, like I said, I'm waiting for my parts caster. I'm itching for it. Not only to just show off to you guys, but also to really do some recording with it. I've got some tracks to complete. But hopefully that will be coming up here soon, guys. Just do well this week. God bless all you guys, and take care.